Thank you. My apologies, everyone, for the technical problems. I hope everybody was able to get on and hear. I'd like to say hello and welcome to everyone to the Funders Together to End Homelessness webinar on using data to improve rapid rehousing services. My name is Ann Miskey. I'm Executive Director of Funders Together, and we're excited to have you join us today for what promises to be an informative webinar. We know that rapid rehousing is increasingly being used as an effective way to end homelessness and to quickly get people back into housing. This model has been around for a few years now, but it is still relatively new, and we know that data isn't always readily available, or sometimes it's difficult to understand how to analyze and use the data. Our presentation today is full of information on how we can better use data on rapid rehousing to improve this model, and especially to look at what role funders can play in supporting rapid rehousing and the collection and analysis of data. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. All participants are on mute and will remain on mute throughout the presentation. If you have a question during the presentation, you can type it into the question box on your webinar panel, which is located on the right side of your computer screen. The question box looks like this. You can enter a question at any time, but we will save content-related questions for the end of our panelists' presentations. Finally, this presentation will be recorded, and because we want this to be a space for candid discussion among funders, this presentation will only be made available to Funders Together members on the past events page of our website. You'll have to log in to view the recording. If you have any trouble doing so, you can email Lauren Bennett at lauren@funderstogether.org. Now, I would like to introduce today's panelists and thank them for joining us and sharing their knowledge and information with us. To start, we have Mark Johnston. Mark is a good friend of Funders Together and is someone who's worked on homelessness for well over 30 years. He helped create HUD-VASH, Shelter Plus Care, and the Continuum of Care concept and program. He retired from HUD last year, where he served as the Assistant Secretary. He is now a consultant helping communities and states end homelessness. Michael McConnell is a San Diego business owner who directs all of his philanthropy and volunteer time to solving homelessness. He is also the founding member of Funders Together to End Homelessness San Diego and a member of the Regional Continuum of Care Council. He was also selected as San Diego's team leader for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs 25 Cities Initiative. Brande Mead is the Human Services Manager for the Maricopa Association of Governments. She oversees the Human Services Division to identify strategies and address human services priorities at the regional level. She previously worked for the Arizona Family Housing Fund, where she focused on affording housing opportunities for Arizona's low-income families. And then finally, Dr. Jamie Taylor, who is manager with Cloudburst Consulting Group. She provides technical assistance and training to community and state-level systems of care, providing evaluation, data sharing, performance measurement, and data visualization subject matter expertise to Housing and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and also to SAMHSA. She's currently running a multi-site project evaluating the impacts of rapid rehousing assistance on housing stability and family well-being outcomes in households who experience homelessness. Again, thank you to all of our panelists. And Jamie, how would you like to start us off?
Thanks, Anne. We can go to the next slide. Great. So we're all very excited to be here sharing with you today what we've learned in the last 6 months, a very intensive, innovative project. And you're going to hear about what we've done, and you're going to hear about what some of the impacts are from the people who participated in the project with us. But really the beginning of this project, which is using data for rapid rehousing improvements, it really has two overall key goals. And the first one is supporting the development of performance culture. Supporting the development of performance culture in all community care and communities and regions. Our second goal is really to focus on rapid rehousing as a fractal of the whole, as a way of looking at the entire system for system improvement. So as Anne said earlier, rapid rehousing, as we know, is really a brand new, fairly new initiative. Not brand new, but really began, as we know, in 2009 with HPRP. And we also know that here on the phone, everyone here is really committed into the new federal goal that we have, which is focusing on ending family homelessness by 2020, really on top of our goals to end veteran and chronic homelessness. And there's a lot of national policy attention and focus and support for the expansion of rapid rehousing based on our initial evidence and what we do know its positive effects on rapid rehousing. Fundamentally, the very most important thing to remember here, the very most important concept to remember here is how new this initiative is, and then the accumulation of evidence has only just begun for us to understand rapid rehousing effects. And that is the science of any kind of new initiative. So we're right where we're supposed to be on understanding rapid rehousing and its impacts, but it's also new science, and we are beginning to accumulate what this evidence looks like from different places. So the next slide. We're going to share with you some of these, which are some of the most important evidence. We have from Philadelphia, we had the study that was done in their HPRP data all 3 years of their rapid rehousing study. And this study created comparison groups, which is also very critical to have a rigorous design, so you can answer that question, what would have happened to households if they didn't get rapid rehousing? So in this rigorous study, there was the impact on the number of households that returned to homelessness after receiving rapid rehousing. For rapid rehousing households was 14% return to homelessness rate, compared to almost 40% of similar households who did not receive rapid rehousing and yet returned to homelessness. This analysis also looked at who was most likely to return, and previous shelter stays was one of the key factors in returning back to homelessness as a risk factor. The state of Georgia is also another study that's been done and actually presented on the last couple of years. They also did a propensity score match, the second level of that study, and they looked at, this is state level data, and they were looking at the households who returned to homelessness, who looked like family households, and they found that rapid rehousing households were over 3 times less likely to return to homelessness than similar households. And for singles, they found it was almost 4 times less likely, single households, to return to homelessness. And I'm going to pass it over next slide to Mark to talk about some continued expansion of our understanding of rapid rehousing impacts.
Thanks, Jamie. So 2 other data sets regarding rapid rehousing that are significant are the Family Options Study and data from VA on the SSVF program. In terms of family options, it's a study that I think all of us are somewhat familiar with. The final isn't out yet. That'll be another year or so. But the interim findings do indicate a number of interesting things to be aware of. It really looked at impact and cost of different interventions. And at the interventions they were looking at, the one that was the most effective, not surprisingly, was vouchers, housing choice vouchers. The people were shortest in their homeless spells in the voucher program. And it's really not surprising, I think, to any of us that the ideal solution would be a Section 8 voucher. Unfortunately, we've known from the beginning, back when the McKinney Act was created, there's not nearly enough Section 8s out there to solve homelessness, and thus the various other interventions, including rapid rehousing. So it's significant that when you look beyond the voucher program, that rapid rehousing has a number of significant outcomes to it. It also reduced the length of homelessness, not quite as quickly as vouchers, but fairly quickly. It had by far the lowest cost, which I think is significant. So in the voucher program, the Family Option Study is finding that per stay, so as long as the family is getting the intervention, vouchers are $19,000 and counting, because that's a long-term subsidy and that cost will increase. But even during the interim findings, it was $19,000 per household. Emergency shelter was $17,000 per stay. Transitional housing was $33,000 per stay. And then finally, rapid rehousing was just 7,000 per stay, despite the fact that a significant percentage, as you see on the top left, of those families did not return to homelessness during the study period. The SSVF program rapid rehousing component also is showing very positive elements, especially on return to homelessness, being very low, that 84% of singles and 90% of families did not return to homelessness within the next year. So those are two also encouraging pieces of information about the efficacy of rapid rehousing as a very promising practice.
Next slide. So from this commitment to developing performance culture, we developed a work plan with HUD, a HUD-funded TA dollars. We, with the Cloudburst group and Mark Johnston, hand in hand, and we reached out to 6 different areas. So they're not all communities. 2 were states, 3 were cities, and 1 was a small county in Michigan. And these are connections that we've had in understanding that each of these sites have very good HMIS data systems that we could work with, and they also had a very strong commitment to improving their rapid rehousing. So we reached out to these 6 sites, and they connected with our project, and we kicked off really a 6-month intensive project across each of these sites. Next slide. What we did, the 3 key goals and actual pieces of the project, which again we were doing across all 6 sites, was 1, to use the HMIS data for local evaluation. So we wanted to support data-driven decision-making on the local level, and we know HMIS data is sitting there like a gold mine, and most often not mined by localities. So we wanted to pull the HMIS data out, work with that process of getting it out, and we wanted to prepare that data for analysis, which is what we spent about 60% of the project time was on data pull, data repull, data analysis preparation, re-preparation, reiteration of that, so that we could actually visualize the data. Mark, you want to talk about the last goal once we have the data out?
Sure. So with that HMIS data and with data visualization, so the community can really understand what the data is showing, the next step that we used was to say, well, how can you actually use this to affect systems change? So there were different levels of teams within communities that were able to use this data, look at and assess what challenges they really had, and then identify very specifically what were the action steps we could actually be taking to really change within our system.
Can we go to the next slide? So really this is showing you the process of who and what and how we did this. So we were really marrying the COC leadership with the HMIS leadership and our research analytics leadership. So the new marriage is bringing in the research analytics into this, and each of these steps were done with the community. We held weekly meetings with each site and their project leadership, which consisted of their HMIS leadership as well as their different continuum of care leadership. And we worked with first getting the data out, which was sometimes like sort of getting a tooth pulled in some ways. So it was a new process for all of us. So we had to work back and forth. We had our top-level HMIS gurus like Barb Ritter from Michigan supporting the data pull process, the service points and client track. And then we worked as a research team in preparing that data, much as you do for research analysis, but we were preparing it for local community analysis. And then we reported out on that data, and we would have the communities review that data over and over again. And we would go back to each level when we found things were not working with the data, again, very iterative and really making sure that the community buy-in for the data representation of what's actually in their HMI system, everybody was in agreement as. So we would go through the data review process on data quality and better understand what may or may not have been a problem with the data pull process, the data analysis process, or how the HMIS data was actually put into the system. and then we would do the reanalysis, reworking with the communities, and put it all into a data dashboard for the improvement plans. So go to the next slide. And we're going to show you some of the data dashboards quickly before we talk about with two of our sites actually what the experience is like for them. But this is really the big impacts that came out of this system learning project. So this is based on feedback from the 6 sites. What were the biggest impacts that occurred? We saw this happen, and you're going to hear more specifics about that again from Brande and Mike. But overall, we saw the HMIS data quality improvement efforts because people got to see what was going on in their HMI system. We are reporting and analyzing this data on a program level, so they were able to see it system-wide. They were able to see it by program, by provider, what the different impacts are, and they were also able to see the interaction of those. But a big, huge impact was data quality improvement overall in lots of different ways. There was also, for the first time, every single rapid housing service system inside of their continuum of care was seen connected to each other. Because as we know, rapid rehousing is delivered in many different ways depending upon who the provider is. And this motivated many systems to be connecting a new network of rapid rehousing across their rapid rehousing system for provider learning. But they were able to assess their rapid rehousing systems by a program level across their entire system and understand the different relational interactions that were happening in the data analysis outcomes. And Mark, over to you for additional learnings.
So I was able to be in San Diego and in Salt Lake watching this happen a bit, and it really was impressive to see different groups, providers, city, county, state folks, looking at this information together, especially when you see it in a clear visualization where they could all understand what it meant and could really have an in-depth conversation and have some comfort that actually is their data and it's pretty good data. And it really allowed them to start asking the questions about, well, given this information, given how our rapid rehousing projects are working, what could we do to be improving them? And that's one of the keys of the project as it ends, that there will be some real commitment locally to carry this forward and really continue to improve their data quality, the use of the data, and making strategic decisions with that information.
And we'll hear more about that from our 2 funders. Next slide. So we wanted to give you a sense of what the visuals look like, which is one of the end results. So after the analysis and reanalysis of the data, our team, the Cloudburst team, worked with creating the data visualization PowerPoints essentially. So it was a way of summarizing their data, which they've all been looking at over time in Excel sheets and different worksheets, going over what that data results look like. And we were showing analysis on multiple factors. 2 of the big important ones for this HUD system performance is return to homelessness, as we imagine, and also length of time in homelessness before leaving homelessness, before entering rapid rehousing in this case. So we created data slides that just use very simple data infographic techniques, but we wanted to make sure that the data outcomes that everyone had worked so hard on finalizing and agreeing to were actually made visible so you could have ongoing system engagement around these important factors. The entire point is to develop a performance culture, which means to promote, as Mark was saying, to promote questions and see questions as the answers, not for scorecards, but to promote questions. So everything we did in every single phone call was to promote this concept of what's the culture, whereby you can look at your data and begin asking each other questions. How do we best improve this? How do we look at that? What additional data do we need? We'll go to the next slide. So this is just an example of Memphis. One of the overall slides we showed was not just rapid rehousing data. We also showed the data on who is entering other housing programs. We did a little bit more with transitional housing. We did nothing with the permanent supportive housing. We're really looking at the interaction of rapid rehousing and the factors related to that. And we did do some reporting out on who's entering the transitional housing programs, how many transitional housing programs do they have by type, by disability, so they could actually see those trends in really promoting discussions on that interaction between transitional housing programs and rapid rehousing. And again, not for judgment, but for promoting more questions. Next slide. So this is just an example also of in the households that return to homelessness. We did additional analysis on those households to see what are the factors related to that. So we're able to again promote discussion on who or how really systems could begin to understand how their system is working. This is a very small number to return. It was one of our smallest cities, but to really help better understand who was returning back to homelessness and why. Next slide. We also did GIS mapping because we think it's a very important tool, a visual in understanding where your system is. This map here is showing Salt Lake County, one of the continuing of cares in Utah, and it's actually showing where rapid rehousing households moved to. So it was a way to see where they were distributed after they received rapid rehousing. And we also showed where the rapid rehousing providers were in the other states. So again, it's a mirror for promoting discussion on who and what is happening in our system around rapid rehousing. Next slide. And so with the data dashboards, there was the end goal was that the information would get presented back to the larger network of stakeholders for the development of rapid housing improvement plans. And Mark did an amazing job facilitating 2 of those processes. I'll let him share that.
Okay. So as Jamie's indicated, using the data and getting data visualization are really key to the project. But without using it to make change, it really wouldn't be worth much. And so one of the keys really is to do something with this information. So each of the 6 sites have or will very, very shortly be using the data and the visualization charts to begin assessing how they move forward to increase their performance in rapid rehousing. And this approach can be used for any aspect of solving homelessness. This particular project focuses on rapid rehousing. So in the project, we use the goal and driver diagram approach to decision-making that some of you may be familiar with. It really can be readily used to help a very diverse group of people. As I mentioned earlier, the stakeholders that we had in San Diego and in Salt Lake, including providers, public housing authorities, et cetera, groups that might not always be working together on particular projects like this did in this sense. And getting all of their buy-in to discuss it was really fascinating to watch and invaluable. I've seen it used and participated in it over the years in the 100,000 Homes campaign with dozens of communities. And what I like most about it is it's a very efficient way to quickly get various stakeholders focused on particular issues. So as Jamie indicated, I facilitated 2 of these sessions. One was in Salt Lake and one in San Diego. We started out having every attendee, and there were about 12 in Utah and around 20 in San Diego, identify what they each consider to be the particular strengths and challenges related to rapid rehousing in their community. And it was interesting to watch, and you could see that there were some strengths and weaknesses raised that not everybody had appreciated. They then identified the possible rapid rehousing goal that they would want to achieve in the next 6 months. So very time limited, very focused. And then they placed their ideas on a poster, and we voted on them. So every stakeholder in the room brought up their stickies and voted on which goal they wanted to focus on. We then identified the challenges related to getting to that goal, and then the action steps. So in this slide, you'll see one of the goals identified was to expand the number of rapid rehousing subsidies to 1,000 households per year by this coming December. And then we identified, and I was just a facilitator, so when I say we, I meant the community, as these were the 3 key areas that we needed to get accomplished in order to get 1,000 subsidies. educating the community stakeholders on rapid rehousing success so people could have the buy-in to really invest their time and resources in it by October. Increase rapid rehousing funding sources beyond ESG, which this particular community was using to a very large extent, and then educating and recruiting rapid rehousing providers so that we'd have more units and more capacity to put them in. And it only takes about 2 hours to go through this process, and at the end, all these little green boxes were actually specific actions that individual stakeholders committed to do by a certain date, so that at the end of the 2-hour process, you had a game plan for actually going after these 1,000 units. So back to you, Jamie.
So this is really the core of the work with the communities, because it was this back and forth, again, of this marriage of the research analytic capacities with their HMI analysis and the COC leadership and rapid rehousing leadership on the calls weekly, making an iterative process, building trust, and then their ownership of that data to create their own improvement plans. We also, in the research analysis, we also went beyond the data dashboards and the rapid rehousing improvement plans with 2 of the communities. We were able to do the propensity score match, which is the method that was presented earlier in the slide in both Philadelphia and Georgia. So the propensity score match is an approach that creates, it's a research analysis approach, totally done by the researchers, by my team. So in that approach, what we were doing is trying to do a more rigorous evaluation. Our data dashboards are the critical visibility of the assessment of rapid rehousing, but not the evaluation. So they're 2 different things. So we were able to do and support the community assessment and ownership of their data for project planning that could be data-driven for continuous improvement. The evaluation of rapid rehousing requires a more rigorous research method, and you want the comparison group to answer that question: what would have happened to households if they did not get rapid rehousing? So we were able to do that with San Diego and Phoenix data, and Mike McConnell is going to share some of those results and impacts with you. But it is our goal as we continue on doing the data analytics and the data dashboards to support the assessment of data-driven planning, and also to support and increase the evaluation of rapid rehousing impacts where we can. So I'm going to pass it over to Mike to talk to you about how the assessment process went in San Diego, and I'll also share with you some of the propensity score match results we found in San Diego.
Thanks, Jamie.
Mike? Yep.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank also, obviously, Jamie and Cloudburst for doing, including San Diego in the project, and really thank Mark for actually coming into San Diego and getting us kicked off on the right foot by convening our first meeting here. So if you go to the next slide. There we go. So we look at this as a kind of a bigger project, which is really what Jamie touched on, and that's about building a performance culture in your community. San Diego, probably like many of your communities, has been skeptical of the longer-term effectiveness of rapid rehousing and really just using outcome measurements in general. San Diego is also in the middle of a fairly major transformation, trying to shift our large base of resources away from temporary housing to more housing first and permanent housing focused interventions. And tools like this are just essential in that shift. They're essential to a wide variety of stakeholders in your community to educate and inform people about what they should be investing in and what they should be implementing on the ground in their programs. I can't stress enough the creative visualizations that have been done by the Cloudburst team. It gives you an effective on-the-ground tool to take around and present to different stakeholder groups that very clearly identify the value of rapid rehousing versus usual care and other interventions in your community. We've moved from a distrust of data, skepticism, to now I'm asked on a pretty frequent basis about data quality issues, different things, not just even around rapid rehousing, but just around outcome measurements in our community regarding our HMIS system data and sources such as that. And a lot of that has really been driven by the rapid rehousing evaluation and the fact that we started this right off from the beginning as we're not here to talk about using data as a hammer. We're talking about using data as a tool to inform our work and make our work better collectively. And that really has been a good start to this project for us and helped other items in our community move forward at the same time. We're factoring in the rapid rehousing evaluation into our COC, some of our COC decisions around this year's NOFA and how we should be reallocating projects. It's made the folks who are involved in that process feel even more comfortable with our decisions about moving away from more of the temporary housing-based interventions into the rapid rehousing. The cost data has been instrumental in educating funders about where they can get the most leverage with their dollars. So being able to see a visualization like the one you see on the screen certainly shows a whole variety of success rates, all of which are very acceptable, but it also shows you a wide variety of costs. And it gives us something to ask even additional questions about and to take this evaluation to the next level and keep people interested in learning more. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the propensity match analysis has really been helpful in showing that this is an effective longer-term intervention versus usual care. It's just a better place to invest our money. So this particular part of the evaluation has been very effective with our funders group and also with other funders that I reach out to in the community. So now when people come to me and ask about what they should be putting in their applications, I can show them evaluations like this, and it's a very powerful tool to make them include rapid rehousing when they're putting out funding, or to make certainly make it a priority or make that funding available for this intervention. Where before, since this is such a new intervention, primarily within the last few years as we've been ramping this up, many of our funders in the community who are not primarily focused just on homelessness aren't willing to take this risk and really promote rapid rehousing without something like this to back it up with. With these types of analyses, that they have something in hand that they can show there's a reason to add this to their applications. Well, I can't stress that enough. Let me go ahead and try to wrap this up with the next slide. So it's brought together a team, providers, and other stakeholders in the community to start looking at this data over and over, month after month. We have a monthly meeting. The next one happens to be in a couple of hours. So we'll go and talk really, a lot of our focus has been on data quality issues and making sure that we actually have as much trust in the data as we have or we can have by going through and looking and cleaning up our data so that when we do these evaluations, we have even more confidence in them moving forward. So that group continues to meet, and we'll continue to do so from here on out. We'll evolve what we do. We're not always going to focus on the data quality issues, but we're also going to put together a rapid rehousing learning collaborative in order to improve project performance, and this will probably be the cornerstone of that learning collaborative. We'll go in and analyze the data in a little bit deeper level, the comparisons between why some projects have a higher return to homelessness than others, the different costs. This has already prompted a very good analysis of the eligibility of all our different projects and how they're running. So we had quite a few, as you saw on the previous screen, of rapid rehousing projects. And this has prompted us to go through and look at how each project is actually running, what their eligibility criteria, what type of clients are they taking versus the other projects, so we can start seeing where's where's the sweet spot for this intervention in our community. But most likely we're going to see that it actually works for quite a few people across the spectrum. But we're going to really start looking into that, and it's going to inform how we form these projects moving forward. So I'm going to end it there and try to save a little bit of extra time for questions.
And Brande Mead from Phoenix is going to share with us their experience in Phoenix. Brande?
Great, thank you, Jamie. Our continuum of care was really excited to be part of this project. In our community, we have many different programs, rapid rehousing programs. We have several different funders and varying outcomes among all of our different programs. We have a local funders collaborative group, and there is a lot of motivation among the continuum of care to use this project and to learn from the data dashboards and our rapid rehousing programs so that we can develop a continuous improvement process and use this data and this project to standardize our rapid rehousing services and our projects within the community. I also wanted to mention that this is important because we are implementing our coordinated entry process within our continuum of care, and we're finding that many of the majority actually of our individuals and families that are being assessed are scoring for rapid rehousing as the intervention that is the best fit for their needs. So this data from this project really came at the best time. The dashboard has helped our continuum of care visualize how rapid rehousing is working through looking at the data. And you'll see from the slide it shows the household average days homeless before going into rapid rehousing. And we hadn't looked at this data in this way before, so it's led to many local discussions and conversations about how we can reduce the time homeless for individuals and families. Really, this data is being used as a baseline for our community, so we're looking at this data and asking the question, how can we use this information to set local goals and decrease the number of days homeless for people in our community. Next slide. So here we're looking at the return rate, or the percent of households returned to homelessness. And from this data, again, we've had several conversations about how the level of rapid rehousing assistance correlates to the return rate. And you'll see from the slide it ranges from 0% to 23% return rate. So we're comparing the percentage of returns to the box on the right, which shows the average total of rent payment, which ranges from $615 to almost $3,000. And we're really analyzing this information and trying to determine if there's a correlation between those with increased rent assistance and return rates. So this is something I think that we'll continue to look at and come back to as we continue to work on this project. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the leadership in our community and the process that we went through. We did have a rapid rehousing leadership team, which, as Jamie mentioned, met on a weekly basis as the data was being pulled and as the dashboards were being built. And this was really important because it included rapid rehousing providers, included our HMIS lead agency, a funder, Valley of the Sun United Way, as well as ESG funders in that leadership team. And it created a sense of ownership and buy-in into the project because they were on that leadership team and participated in the process, so that was very important. We also had a rapid rehousing design group that has met 4 times and is continuing to meet on a monthly basis. And the design group is a learning community of rapid rehousing providers seeking to improve the performance and outcomes of the rapid rehousing projects through a peer-to-peer sharing program And so they've had, like I said, 4 meetings, and through those meetings, we've cataloged all of the rapid rehousing programs in the community, have talked about the strengths and challenges of the rapid rehousing programs, and have reviewed strategies to recruit and retain landlords in the community, as well as looking at opening up the group to funders so that we can include their perspective as well. Wanted to talk about really kind of our system impact and what we've learned. In June, we had our improvement plan meeting, and we followed the driver diagram process, and we talked about strengths of the system, and I just wanted to share some of the strengths that came out during these conversations. And a couple that came to the forefront were the creation of forums like this project, bringing together participants to talk about rapid rehousing, and allow these studies and this data is really helping to shape our system. That the increase of rapid rehousing in the region is reducing the pressure on our emergency shelters, and that we're learning how effective, cost-effective rapid rehousing is, and how it's transforming our community to a housing-first model. And also there's increased community awareness and support by funders, by cities, and also by foundations in the community based on what we're learning from this project and the data that's come out of this project. Again, we're learning that rapid rehousing is highly effective, and the data is showing that. So we're using this data to develop standards of excellence for our rapid rehousing programs. The funders are looking at this data, and we need more rapid rehousing to finish the job of ending homelessness, and we're really using this data to help determine how those rapid rehousing programs can be most effective. As far as our next steps, we are going to continue to have our leadership team meet, as well as our rapid rehousing design group on a monthly basis. And we've been working with Jamie and her team to continue the analysis of this data on an ongoing process, and have had a couple of meetings. They've been kind enough to share their statistical analysis process with us, and we have a data expert on staff here at our agency that is going to continue the data pulling and to continue developing our data dashboards moving forward. So we're in the midst of working that piece out currently.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for this information, and I think everybody will agree that data, although not always considered the sexiest thing in the work that we're doing, is really vital to changing things and to really ending homelessness. We've seen what data has done in the movement to end homelessness, so this is wonderful. I want to open it up now if there are any questions from the audience. But maybe in the meantime, as we're waiting to see if anybody types us a question, can one of you, maybe Michael or Brande, speak a little bit more about the effect? You've spoken about what this data has done in terms of funders and getting people on side. I know a lot of communities have been resistant to moving away from transitional housing, for example, into this. Have you seen that this has had an effect in some of those pockets of resistance, if you will, when you've presented this kind of data?
So Brande, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. And yes, we did have some conversations when we were comparing the results from our rapid rehousing programs to the transitional housing programs. And even though we had those providers at the table, there still were questions about whether or not they could believe in the data that was being shared, because we weren't seeing as great of outcomes with our transitional housing programs. And instead of looking at that and saying, you know, what can we learn from this? They're saying, you know, we don't believe that this data is correct. So we had to go back and, you know, check our data. It did lead to some data quality improvements, but, you know, really bring that back to the community and say, you know, these are, the data is showing that this is the outcome, and how can we use this to improve overall program performance. So there was some resistance. I also wanted to mention in our peer group discussions, we're finding that providers are highly likely to share strengths of their programs, but we're finding that we're not having as open and candid conversations about weaknesses and on areas where providers need help and they're feeling vulnerable in front of their peers. So we're really working on the relationships within those groups so that they can feel comfortable to share those vulnerabilities with each other so that we can, again, learn from that and improve our system.
Great, thank you.
And I would
go ahead, Michael.
Let me just add something really quick. I'd really want to stress the value of having somebody from the outside of your community come in and do this. We've made a lot of presentations in San Diego about the effectiveness of different interventions based on our HMIS data, but this really brought it all home for people in a really nice package. So we didn't have really a lot of pushback because this was confirming a lot of what we already thought. And so we really, when we rolled this out, and it was coming from the folks that were doing it, there wasn't a lot of pushback. It fit really nice in line with what we'd already been moving forward in the community, and it's going to continue to be a great tool. So, and I also want to stress that it really helped our HMIS system look through some of their issues. Obviously, we were chosen because we did have strong HMIS data, but as you all know, we can't strengthen that data enough, and this was an effective tool for helping us think through improvements to our HMIS data system.
Great, thank you. I do have a question here. So how would you, and I think this would be for Mark or, well, for any of the panelists actually, how would you suggest going about a deep dive into the data in a local community? The person says, we are currently at a point where we're recognizing differences in the way rapid rehousing programs are delivered. So how would you go about that, taking a really deep dive and looking at the differences in the programs, not just the overall data?
Well, this is Michael, and I'll just take a really quick stab at this. I always like to bring together a small group first and get a small group on the same page with how they want to move that forward and how they want to look at the data. So that's always what I would recommend.
Okay.
And also, the data project is we pull 4 years of data from every site to do this, and so we have actually put it now into Tableau format, which is a much more visible and flexible system to see data results. So the iterative process of building trust is critical, but anyway, this process is about showing it at the provider level and using it, showing it in a way that everybody can see. So this next iteration of our project will include Tableau as a visible framing of that data for communities to see and ask questions of the data itself while we're building and cleaning it up.
And I wanted to underscore, I was at HUD on this issue of homelessness for 25 years and was involved in every single study that HUD ever did on homelessness. And it usually took us 2, 3, 4, 5 years to conduct the study and get the findings out. The beauty of this approach is that really in 3 or 4 months, you've got data that you can actually start looking at and use. So it's pretty amazing to me that you can do a pretty darn deep dive in just a couple of months because you've got this really amazing resource of HMIS. And Jamie and her Cloudburst data team help the communities along all the way along just to make sure, you know, it's getting clean, that the analysis is done well. And so it's just a unique tool that I had never seen before. I'm just used to these multi-year contracts, and by the time you get to findings, it's not even that relevant often. So that's one thing I love about this.
Great,
and the presentation format is really powerful. It really is the way it's visualized.
And is this something, Brande, you spoke a little bit about this, but I think one of the questions a lot of people have is about how you continue on with this after the fact, after your consultants leave. Is this something that you can train people at the local level to continue the process going forward?
Yes, and thank you for that question. We are, like I said, working with data analysts within our staff that will continue the project moving forward, and we've already had a couple of meetings with Jamie and her team, and they're sharing the process with us for how they got the data from HMIS and how the analysis was conducted so that we can model that moving forward, and we are just right on the path to do that.
Wonderful, thank you. One last question, and I know we're almost out of time here, so we'll just start on this one because this is a big question, but talk to us a little bit about that iterative process of building trust. What specifically did you have to do, or did providers have to do when you walked away in order to develop that trust?
Well, we can all make a quick comment on this. I mean, for me, you have to keep showing up, and you have to have courage to admit that you're wrong. So all of us in the data analysis, data is neutral evidence. So if the data is not reflecting what you think it should be, then somewhere along the line, whether it was in the HMIS data input, or whether it was the way the data was pulled, or whether it was the way my team, we constructed the data analysis baseline, we had to go back and find that and dig it out and come back and show that over and over and over again. And that just meant showing up and building trust and let neutral evidence guide the discussion. But I would say trust doesn't happen until at least 2 months in on every single site. But others can comment. They were living it with me.
So I don't know.
Go ahead.
Michael?
I don't know if this particularly pertains to trust or not, but one good thing that people will find value in this is, as HUD moves more and more toward this performance measurement funding, this is a tool to help you get there, and providers like that. We need some, so our community needs that guidance on how to improve our applications and what to be investing in, and this is another tool to help us actually get more funding. So when you talk about getting more funding, I guess that is a good way to build some trust too, because we're trying to help the community, right? We're trying to build up our resources and the right kind of resources, and that will bring more funding to our community. So it's a win-win.
Perfect, and I think that that's probably a very good way to end this. So again, thank you very much to our panelists. On the slide there you will see their contact information. If you want to know more about this study, or if you're interested in potentially having this done in your own community, you can feel free to contact us at Funders Together, or again the folks here on the slide. But thank you all very much again to our panelists and to our participants in our webinar today. Thank you, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Bye-bye.